Welcome to the Secrets of the Bible channel. The prophecy of the 3 days of darkness from the Bible has captured the attention of many, sparking curiosity and concern. Could this ancient prediction be on the verge of becoming reality in our time? This topic isn't just about revisiting the terrifying darkness that once enveloped Egypt. It's about understanding a divine warning that might hold relevance for us today. As the world faces increasing turmoil, some believe that this prophecy is more than just a story. It's a glimpse into what may come. Are we truly prepared for such a profound event? And more importantly, what does it mean for our future? This video delves into these questions, exploring the possibility that the 3 days of darkness might soon unfold before our very eyes. Let's start by diving into one of the most ominous events in the Bible, the 9th plague that struck Egypt. The biblical passage about the 3 days of darkness appears in Exodus chapter 10, verses 21 to 29. This is the story of the 9th plague that God brought upon Egypt to force Pharaoh to release the Israelites from slavery. Specifically, God said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward the sky, and there will be darkness over Egypt, darkness so thick that it can be felt." When Moses raised his hand toward the sky, all of Egypt was covered in darkness for 3 days. During this time, no one could see anyone else or move from their place, but the Israelites still had light in their homes. But why did God choose darkness as one of the plagues? Well, the answer lies in its symbolic power. If you're intrigued by deep insights and hidden truths, don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now, join our community, and be the first to explore our latest content. By subscribing, you'll stay connected and never miss an update. Let's dive into these mysteries together. In the Bible, darkness often represents divine judgment and abandonment. It's God's way of showing His displeasure and withdrawing His presence. Think about it. Have you ever been in complete darkness? It's disorienting, it's scary, and it can even make you feel utterly lonely. Now imagine that on a national scale, lasting for days. That's what the Egyptians experienced. But this darkness wasn't just any ordinary nightfall. The Bible describes it as a darkness that could be felt. Can you imagine a darkness so thick you could touch it? This supernatural darkness was a clear sign that something beyond human understanding was at work. But there is more to this story than just a supernatural blackout. This plague was a direct challenge to one of Egypt's most powerful deities, Ra, the sun god. How did this plague demonstrate God's power? By plunging Egypt into darkness, God was essentially saying, "Your son, God is powerless against me. I control the light and the darkness." It was a clear demonstration of His sovereignty over all creation and other so-called gods. This act wasn't just about showing off power. It was a profound theological statement. In a polytheistic culture where different gods are believed to control different aspects of nature, the God of Israel was declaring His absolute authority over everything. Interestingly, while Egypt was crowded in darkness, the Israelites had light in their dwellings. This stark contrast highlighted God's favor towards His chosen people. This distinction between the Egyptians and Israelites serves as a powerful reminder of God's care for His people, even in the midst of judgment. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? That even in the darkest times, God can provide light for those who trust in Him. But why do you think God made this decision? It wasn't just favoritism. This act was meant to show both the Egyptians and the Israelites that the God of Israel was different from the other gods. He had the power not just to bring judgment, but to protect and provide in the midst of it. Despite the overwhelming evidence of God's power, Pharaoh remained its newborn. He attempted to negotiate, offering to let the Israelites go, but insisting their livestock stay behind. Now, why do you think Pharaoh kept resisting? Even after seeing such clear demonstrations of God's power, this stubbornness highlights a tragic human tendency, the hardening of our hearts against God's warnings. It's a sobering reminder of how pride can blind us to the truth, even when it's staring us in the face. Pharaoh's behavior is a cautionary tale for all of us. How often do we, like Pharaoh, try to bargain with God? We might say, "Okay, God, I'll do this, but I'm keeping that." But God doesn't want partial obedience. He wants our whole heart. In contrast to Pharaoh's stubbornness, Moses demonstrated unwavering faith and obedience. He refused to compromise, insisting that not a single hoof. Moses' steadfast commitment serves as an inspiring example of faith in action. He trusted God's plan entirely, even when it meant confronting one of the most powerful rulers of his time. But let's be real, standing firm like Moses isn't easy. It requires courage, conviction, and a deep trust in God. Moses knew that partial obedience wasn't obedience at all. He understood that God's commands weren't negotiable. Many believe that this biblical account isn't just a historical event, but a prophecy that will repeat itself in the end times. Some saints and mystics throughout history have spoken of a coming period of darkness that will engulf the world. So let me ask you this: could we be on the brink of experiencing our own 3 days of darkness? It's a chilling thought, isn't it? But before we dismiss it, consider the parallels between our world today and the world of ancient Egypt. Are we not, in many ways, living in a time of spiritual darkness? Have we not, like the Egyptians, often put our trust in false gods, money, power, technology? Look around you. The world seems to be growing darker in many ways. Morally, spiritually, and even literally, with increasing natural disasters and strange weather phenomena. From political unrest to environmental crises, from moral decay to spiritual apathy, many see these as signs that we're approaching a critical moment in history. But let's dig a little deeper. What specific signs might indicate that we're heading towards a time of darkness? Some point to the increasing frequency and intensity of natural disasters. Others note the moral relativism that seems to be spreading across societies. Still, others point to the persecution of believers in many parts of the world. But what exactly would these prophesied 3 days of darkness look like? According to various interpretations, it could be both literal and spiritual. Some envision a physical darkness, perhaps caused by a cosmic event or environmental catastrophe. Others see it as a spiritual darkness, a time of great tribulation and testing for believers. Ask yourself, how would you prepare if you knew a period of intense darkness was coming? This question isn't just hypothetical, it's a call to spiritual readiness, urging us to strengthen our faith and prepare our hearts for challenging times. If it were a physical darkness, how would our world cope? Imagine the chaos that would ensue if the sun didn't rise for 3 days. But perhaps even more daunting is the idea of spiritual darkness, a time when evil seems to have free reign and faith is severely tested. The biblical account of the 9th plague offers valuable lessons for us. Just as the Israelites found light in the midst of darkness, believers are called to be light in a dark world. This could mean offering hope to those in despair, standing for truth in a world of deception, or simply showing kindness in a harsh environment. But being light in the darkness isn't always easy. It often means going against the flow, standing out when it's more comfortable to blend in. It might mean facing ridicule or persecution. But remember, the darker the night, the brighter even a small light shines. Remember Pharaoh's stubborn heart. It's a cautionary tale for us all. In the face of clear warnings and divine intervention, he chose to resist rather than repent. The story of Pharaoh reminds us of the dangers of prayer, pride, and the importance of maintaining a soft, responsive heart towards God. But how does a heart become hardened? It usually doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of ignoring conscience, rationalizing wrong behavior, and repeatedly choosing self over God. The scary thing is the more we resist God, the easier it becomes to keep resisting. One of the most comforting aspects of this prophecy is the reminder of God's sovereignty. Even in the darkest times, He remains in control. Just as God protected the Israelites during the plague of darkness, believers can take comfort in knowing that God watches over His people, even in the most challenging circumstances. This doesn't mean we won't face hardships. The Israelites were still in Egypt, still surrounded by darkness, but they had light in their dwellings. In the same way, God's sovereignty doesn't always mean He'll remove us from dark situations, but He promises to be with us in them. So if this prophecy is indeed about to unfold, how should we prepare? The answer lies not in stockpiling supplies, but in strengthening our spiritual foundations. Now let's face the important question here. What steps can you take to deepen your faith and strengthen your spiritual resilience? This might involve dedicating more time to prayer and Bible study, strengthening your relationships with your faith community, or actively practicing your faith through acts of service. But preparation isn't just about personal spiritual growth, it's also about community. The Israelites faced the darkness together. In the same way, we need to build strong, supportive faith communities that can stand together in challenging times. Even as we consider the possibility of dark times ahead, it's important to remember that darkness never has the final word in God's story. In fact, it's often in the darkest times that God's light shines the brightest. Can you recall a time when you experienced God's presence most powerfully during a difficult period? These experiences remind us that even in the midst of darkness, God is working. Sometimes it's the contrast of the darkness that makes His light all the more visible and powerful. Throughout history, some of the most powerful movements of God have occurred during times of great darkness. Think of the early church growing despite intense persecution, or revivals breaking out in times of moral decay. Could it be that the coming darkness, if it indeed comes, will set the stage for an unprecedented move of God? The potential fulfillment of this prophecy. It's an invitation to be spiritually alert and prepared. If Jesus returned tomorrow, would you be ready? This isn't meant to induce fear, but to inspire a sense of urgency in our spiritual lives. It's a reminder to live each day with purpose, aligning our lives with God's will. But what does it mean to be watchful? It's not about obsessively trying to predict the future or interpret every world event as a sign of the end times. Rather, it's about living with an awareness of God's presence and purposes, being ready to respond to His leading at any moment. While the prospect of 3 days of darkness might sound terrifying, for believers, it's actually a sign of hope. It signifies that God's promises are being fulfilled and that ultimate redemption is near. So, let me ask you this: how can you cultivate hope, even when facing the possibility of dark times? Remember, just as the plague of darkness in Egypt was followed by the Israelites' liberation, any period of darkness we might face is just a prelude to God's ultimate victory. This hope isn't just about looking forward to a better future. It's a powerful force that can transform how we live in the present. When we have hope, we can face challenges with courage, persist in faith, and overcome obstacles. When things get tough, and inspire others to look beyond their current circumstances. Throughout this exploration of the 3 days of darkness prophecy, one theme stands out: the power of faith. Whether it was Moses standing firm before Pharaoh or the Israelites trusting God in the midst of war, faith was the key to navigating dark times. Faith isn't just about believing certain things. It's about trusting God enough to act on those beliefs. It's about choosing to see light when everything around you is dark. It's about holding on to hope when the situation seems hopeless. As we face the possibility of challenging times ahead, let's remember that our faith is not in a prophecy, but in the God who holds the future. He's the same God who brought light out of darkness in creation, who led the Israelites out of Egypt, and who promises to be with us always. Even to the end of the age, it can be seen that the 3 days of darkness in the Bible, recorded in the book of Exodus chapter 10, verses 21 to 29, stand as one of the most miraculous and terrifying events the Egyptians ever faced. This event was not only a physical phenomenon, but also held deep symbolic meaning regarding God's judgment on Pharaoh's arrogance. Those 3 days of darkness represented a withdrawal of God's presence, leaving the world in chaos, confusion, and despair. In the present context, this story is more than just a historical lesson. It resonates strongly with the world we live in today. The darkness in the Bible can be interpreted as a symbol of the moral and spiritual decline we are witnessing in modern times. In an era where people place their trust in money, power, and technology, rather than in spiritual and moral values, we may be edging closer to a period where darkness envelops the world in both literal and metaphorical senses. Looking to the future, the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness can be seen as a warning to humanity. If we continue down the path of indifference, lack of faith, and arrogance, the world may face severe consequences. The 3 days of darkness are not just a historical event, but also a reminder of God's supreme power and the need to return to spiritual values, faith, and humility. From this story, we can learn that in all circumstances, only the light of faith can guide us through the darkness of the age. No matter how the world may change, faith in God will always be the beacon that helps us find hope and salvation in the future. The event of the 3 days of darkness is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, God's light is always present and can shine into the darkest places in our lives. In the Bible, The 3 days of darkness mentioned in Exodus chapter 10, verses 21 to 29, are not directly linked to the concept of the Antichrist. However, in the Christian tradition, especially in end times and apocalyptic prophecies, the 3 days of darkness are sometimes understood as part of the events that will occur during the tribulation, when God's judgment will be executed on the world. The Antichrist is often described in prophetic books, such as the Book of Revelation, as a figure or force that will appear during the end times, oppose God, and lead many people astray. Some views hold that during the time of the Antichrist's appearance, the world will undergo severe trials including supernatural phenomena, such as the 3 days of darkness, to purify and test people's faith. Although the Bible does not explicitly say that the 3 days of darkness are directly linked to the Antichrist, many believe that this event may be part of a series of major end-time signs and events, when the forces of the Antichrist will be defeated and the power of God will be clearly and absolutely demonstrated. The Old Testament does not directly use the term Antichrist, but there are many passages in the Bible that allude to figures or forces that oppose God. One of the most prominent examples is the story of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, described in the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar was the one who captured and destroyed Jerusalem, a symbol of the power and dominion of the Antichrist forces. In the book of Daniel, especially in chapters 7 and 8, the images of beasts represent empires that will arise and oppose God's people. The fourth beast, which is particularly vicious and powerful, is often seen as a prophetic image of the Antichrist. This image is associated with the powers and individuals that will later arise to oppose God's rule on earth. The Antichrist in the Old Testament is often depicted through symbols and images representing rebellion and desecration of the divine. The New Testament provides a clearer picture of the Antichrist, especially in the letters of the Apostle Paul and the book of Revelation of John. The term Antichrist is first mentioned in the letters of John. 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, according to John, the Antichrist is not just a single person, but anyone who denies that Jesus is the Christ. This suggests that the Antichrist is not just a specific individual, but a spirit or force that opposes God. 1 John chapter 2, verses 18 and 19. Little children, it is the last hour. You have heard that the Antichrist is coming, and now many Antichrists have come. By this we know that it is the last hour. They came from us, but they are not of us. For if they had really been of us, they would have remained with us. But they went out to show that not all are of us. This passage emphasizes that the Antichrist is not just a future event, but already appeared in the time of the first believers. This shows that the spirit of Antichrist was present and active in the world, manifested through those who denied the divinity of Jesus. This was not only a rejection of belief in Jesus, but also a rejection of his entire teaching and mission. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, it states, "Every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming and even now is already in the world." This passage makes it clear that the spirit of the Antichrist is already present in the world. It is a spirit that denies Jesus and opposes the truth that he brings. This emphasizes that the Antichrist is not a separate entity, but is part of the deception and blasphemy that exists and spreads in society. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, the Apostle Paul warns, "Let no one deceive you in any way, for before that day comes the rebellion must take place, and the man of lawlessness, who is to be destroyed. He will oppose and exalt himself above everything that is called God or worshipped, so that he will sit in the temple of God and declare himself to be God." In this passage, the Apostle Paul speaks of the man of lawlessness, which is often considered one of the most powerful images of the Antichrist in the New Testament. This lawless man not only opposes God, but also exalts himself as a god, demanding the worship that only God deserves. This is a warning of the end times when the Antichrist will deceive many and create a system that opposes God. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 1, John describes his vision, "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name." This imagery is often associated with the Antichrist, symbolizing a powerful and blasphemous force that rises against God and deceives the world. "The beast I saw was like a leopard, but its feet were like those of a bear, and its mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have been mortally wounded, but its deadly wound was healed. The whole earth admired the beast and followed it. They worshipped the dragon because he had given his power to the beast. And they also worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to fight against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter arrogant and blasphemous words, and it exercised authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth in blasphemy against God and blasphemed his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was allowed to make war against the holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe and language and nation. All who live on the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name is not written in the Lamb's book of life, killed from the foundation of the world. In the book of Revelation, the image of the beast is one of the clearest symbols of the Antichrist. This beast, empowered by the dragon, Satan, is depicted as arrogant, blasphemous, and powerful, and will lead an all-out attack against God. This is the time of great rebellion, when the Antichrist will arise to deceive and control the world, demanding the worship that only God deserves. Revelation shows that this time will be very difficult for believers, but it will also be a time when God's power will be most powerfully demonstrated. Relevance to the modern world. The image of the Antichrist is not only a classical theological concept, but also has profound implications for the modern world. In our day and age, many see the spirit of the Antichrist manifesting itself in moral degradation, religious indifference, and the worship of material values over spiritual ones. The Antichrist can be seen in political, economic, and social systems where power is worshipped, and greed, violence, and injustice become the norm in the digital age. Many are also concerned about the role of technology and misinformation in spreading the spirit of the Antichrist social media platforms with their enormous power to influence. Human perception can become tools for deception and the spread of Antichrist values. The rise of extremist ideologies, the increase in wars and conflicts, and the growth of political powers with global ambitions can all be seen as manifestations of the spirit of the Antichrist. The Antichrist, throughout the Bible, is not only a specific person, but also a symbol of all forces and systems that oppose God. From the Old Testament to the New Testament, we see a clear picture of the Antichrist as a manifestation of human rebellion and arrogance before the power of God. In the modern world, the spirit of the Antichrist can be seen in moral degradation, materialism, and opposition to spiritual and religious values. The Bible not only warns us about the coming of the Antichrist, but also calls us to keep our faith and be ready to face spiritual challenges, no matter what form the Antichrist may take. It is important that we always keep our faith in God and realize that in the end, God's truth and power will triumph over all rebellious forces. Faith in God is a guiding light on the journey of life, filled with challenges and changes. It is an invisible yet incredibly powerful force that helps us overcome times of hardship, suffering, and uncertainty. Faith in God not only brings comfort and hope, but also helps us realize the higher purpose of our lives. When faced with difficulties, that faith empowers us to persevere, stay strong, and never give up. God is the source of unconditional love, always listening and protecting us, no matter the circumstances. In a world full of chaos and doubt, faith in God is the anchor that keeps us steady, the path to inner peace and true love. Every day, as we trust in God, we open the door to miracles and discover the true meaning of life. That faith is not only a spiritual support, but also a beacon of light, guiding us toward love, forgiveness, and everlasting hope. May God bless each and every one of you with peace, love, and strength. May His guidance light your path, and may His grace bring you comfort and hope in every moment. Trust in His divine plan, and may His blessings be with you always. If you've stayed with us until this point, congratulations. You might just be the perfect fit for our exclusive membership. This is your chance to access content that's too extraordinary to be shared with the general public. As a member, you'll be the first to see our latest videos and uncover hidden truths that we can't reveal anywhere else. Our community is expanding rapidly, so make sure you join now before we close off access. To learn more, simply click the link in the description, the pinned comment, or head over to our homepage. Don't miss out. Be part of something truly special.